But we're in a tough situation. We are in a tough situation. The bad news is that global warming will soon be irreversible. And by the end of the 21st century, large parts of the Earth will be underwater. China is emerging as the world's greatest superpower, while continuing to regiment its people and repress democratic civil liberties and human rights. Just as today the West spends its energies fighting an elusive war on terror, generated by its fantasy that our survival depends on dominating other countries to gain their fossil fuels, in the future, Western elites of wealth and power may seek to create medieval-style enclaves surrounded by private Blackwater-style armies to prevent ordinary citizens from getting at their dwindling supplies of food and other goods. Most people will be encouraged to blame each other and fight each other for the decreasing sustenance left to the majority of the planet's residents. And all this is likely to happen gradually as American power slips away, and with it the particular opportunities that the citizens of this partial democracy fought to win in the past. Increasingly, we in the West may be taught to believe the common sense that people only care about themselves, and that nations will always seek to dominate others to advance the interests of their own elites, and that therefore domination, militarism, and cruelty are necessary for us to survive. Though in fact that us, which is economically secure, will be a smaller and smaller part of the entire population of the Western world. And meanwhile, the pathetically inadequate safety net, won through decades of citizen and labor unions activism, may be cut back in the name of economic frugality and keeping taxes low, at least low for the wealthy, who might otherwise cut back on investments and thus provide fewer and fewer jobs for the rest of us. This process started in Wisconsin. It's terrific that people have stood up in Wisconsin and are fighting back. But I don't want to underestimate the other side, that the false consciousness that made it possible for the forces of repression to be in the majority in that government in Wisconsin is also in the majority in several other states, many other states, and this process is not over. Meanwhile, unfortunately, and looking ahead, most liberals and progressives will likely spend the next 20 years either supporting political parties that don't even begin to address these issues in a holistic way, and they will justify that by pointing out that candidate X is really much less bad than candidate Y. And of course they'll be right. But that misses the large picture, that where we're going is a very destructive direction for the planet and for human life on the planet. Or others, wonderful people with good intentions, will be putting their energies into building a community garden or alternative food stores or other intrinsically good local projects or struggles that are satisfying because they are achievable. But unfortunately, these local projects will do nothing discernible to reverse our society's shift away from its founding democratic and human rights principles. Unless there emerges a shared progressive vision, a progressive vision to unify all of the particular wonderful projects. I hope you get what I'm saying here. I'm not in any way putting down any of those particular projects. I'm saying that without a unifying vision, without a way that each of the particular victories can build on each other, we will not be able to stop the direction that this society is moving towards. And it is a direction that will lead to planetary destruction, or at least destruction of human life or human civilization on the planet in the not too long future. I know so many people who get this picture who say, gee, I'm really lucky that I'm not my children or my grandchildren, because I don't want to live in that kind of world that they're going to face. Well, let's not let them have to face that. Let's not let them have to face that. And so what is that alternative vision? Well, we call it the caring society. The caring society, caring for each other and caring for the earth. And I don't want to minimize what we could accomplish if we could create a we. If we could create a we consciousness, a consciousness that we are all in it together. Because, in fact, there are millions and millions of people who want a different reality. But unfortunately, they are split apart, they don't come together, and they don't work in a holistic and unified way. Now, this in part has been the goal of Tikkun since its start in 1986, to foster a vanguard consciousness among tens of thousands of our readers who could understand the depths of depravity that global capitalism and the ethos of materialism and selfishness are creating, the great dangers to this planet, and the pressing need to build a political movement that transcends the narrow economistic legacy of the left. The narrow economistic legacy of the left, namely the legacy, and by the way, I totally support the liberal and progressive agenda in this country, but it has not spoken deeply enough to the real needs that people have, that Peter so eloquently presented. The real needs for a world of love and caring, of kindness and generosity, of a sense of meaning and purpose to life that transcends the individualism and selfishness of American society. And outside of Tikkun and one or two other spiritual progressive magazines, and the network of spiritual progressives, and the good work of Sojourners, and a few other places, you don't hear this kind of talk. You don't hear people talking about love and caring. You don't hear people talking about the search for meaning and purpose in life. And yet, that is an intrinsic part of what people yearn for. Some people move to the religious right because, at least in the religious right, they hear that being talked about, even though it's talked about, and then in an extremely distorted way, it picks up that hunger, and then it shifts it into a negative attack on, well, why are we not having meaning and purpose in life? Why is there this selfishness and materialism flourishing? And they say it's because of the demeaned others. These others only care about themselves. First, it was African Americans. It was gays and lesbians. It was the women's movement, the immigrants. Today, it's all liberals and all progressives. They're only interested in themselves. Pardon me? Oh yeah, and of course now the Muslims in our society also now being demeaned. So it's these groups, but the problem for the left is it doesn't get that even though the right solution is a distorted solution, that what it's talking to, the hunger that it's addressing, is a legitimate hunger. A real hunger for meaning and purpose. A real hunger for a world in which people aren't just looking out for number one. And there you find that very often at the center of what the religious rights churches are about. And unfortunately, you don't feel that energy enough in the liberal and progressive world. I don't mean that it's not there in individuals there. It is. I don't mean that we didn't see a huge upsurge of that when we had this incredible moment of the civil rights movement and the great leadership of Martin Luther King Jr. and many other fantastic, amazing spiritual leaders, one of whom actually is in this room right at this moment, the Reverend J. Alfred Smith. Would you just stand up for a second, J. Alfred? The leader of the Allen Temple Baptist Church in Oakland, and two of us preached together at Martin Luther King Jr.'s church in Atlanta. It was fantastic. And but there have been these moments, and those moments have been the moments when we've been most successful, is when we've transcended the notion that all people want is material well-being and their economic rights. They do need that also, and they do want that also, but they want another dimension of human need that has to be spoken to, and that we in the Tikkun have been talking about. We first called it a politics of meaning. Now we're talking about it as a spiritual politics. We're talking about the need to create a political party that might be based on love and caring and kindness. And maybe some of you come up with the right title for such a political party. But it's absolutely critical that we shift the discourse to a new way of talking in the liberal and progressive world. So when we say we need a vanguard, we're not talking about a communist party, and we're not talking about the kinds of vanguards that are manipulative. We're talking about a vanguard of people, like, let's say, what the Dominicans or what the Franciscans are, or what the Quakers are, or what that is groups of people who have a shared ideology and an understanding that the world needs to hear that shared ideology. And that shared ideology, in contemporary world, ideology is already seen as an evil. Because people have an idea, a shared idea that's already suspect. But in fact, that is desperately what is needed. And we are trying to shape a vanguard of people, a group of people who could take the idea out into the world. And what is that idea? It's very simple. We call it the new bottom line. What's the new bottom line? We want every institution, every social practice, every corporation, as we were talking about here, every corporation, every government policy, every law, every legal institution, the courts, the healthcare system, our educational system, and even our own personal behavior, to be judged efficient, rational, or productive, not only to the extent that they maximize money and power, that's the old bottom line, but also to the extent that they maximize love and caring, kindness and generosity, ethical and ecological sensitivity, enhance our capacity to respond to other human beings as embodiments of the sacred, and enhance our capacity to respond to the universe with awe and wonder and radical amazement at the grandeur of the universe. That's the new bottom line. And that's what is absent from liberal and progressive politics. It's this vision of where you want to go. Okay, when we were last here together, Van Jones said a very important word. He got up here on the podium when we had our founding conference for the Network of Spiritual Progressives in 1996, in 2006, and he said, when Martin Luther King Jr. got up, his speech that became so exciting to people was not, "I have a complaint." Okay? We know the complaints. We know and there are other places where you can get on the web and in magazines and in political speakers on the left. You can hear everything that is screwed up, and there's a tremendous amount that's screwed up in this society and in this world. But what you don't hear is what's the vision, the positive vision. What is it that we're going for? What is it that would excite us? What is it that would make us, sustain us through a long-term struggle? And that's why we're saying it's this new bottom line of love, of kindness, of generosity, of ethical and ecological sensitivity, of caring for the earth and caring for each other, of treating other human beings as embodiments of the sacred, of awe and wonder at the grandeur of creation. That's a vision that people can get behind, and it transcends the left-right ordinary discussions because it speaks to people all across the political spectrum. So as Peter said, people are yearning for something different. We saw it in 2008. Okay? Many of us have become deeply despairing because President Obama did not follow through on the hopes that he had managed to articulate and raise in people. Okay? And not just because he couldn't pass legislation, and then you say, oh well, his Democratic Party didn't stand with him, and the Republicans were so tough and so forth, but because he didn't continue to articulate the ideal. He didn't continue to fight for a vision. And what we're saying is, don't be despairing about that. Look to the fact that when somebody did articulate it in 2008, then tens of millions of people responded. Tens of millions of people said, yes, I want that different kind of world. So if this person is serious about change that we can believe in, I believe in it. You see? So there's something there. There's something in the actual structure of people's desires. But when that doesn't happen, then a lot of people feel betrayed and humiliated. And why humiliated? Because most of us have heard both visions, what I call the right hand of God and the left hand of God. The right hand of God is the vision that says human beings are basically thrown into this world by ourselves. We are surrounded by selfish people who are just looking out for themselves. And if we don't get power and control over them, they will get power and control over us. They will dominate us. They will use us for their purposes. And from that right hand of God vision comes the idea that Homeland Security requires domination and control over others, and that's why we need strong armies to cover and take over the world and have power over the world. And then on the other hand, the left hand of God vision that says, no, wait a second, we didn't come into this world all by ourselves. We actually came through a mother. And the mother was giving us love and caring in those first few years, and we wouldn't have survived without that love and caring. So our initial experience in the world was not one of people just trying to get stuff, but rather of the love that your mother gave to you, or the mothering other, whoever that was. And that sustained us, okay? And your mother didn't have a reasonable expectation of a good return on her investment of time and energy in you. Okay, but she, and a lot of people come up to me and say, Rabbi Lerner, you don't know my mother. So, okay, I'll stipulate any neurosis you want to attribute to your mother, and nevertheless tell you that she or your father or someone provided you with that nurturing energy. Otherwise, you wouldn't have thrived. You wouldn't have been able to survive. So it's that early experience that leads to a different vision of what makes it possible to be secure. And that's the vision of Homeland Security and personal security that can be based on an exchange of caring, of generosity towards others, of love for others. And that's what led us to propose as an alternative. You see, instead of saying, oh, the wars are terrible, again, you need an alternative vision. And so we've said, you want Homeland Security? Homeland Security should come through a strategy not of domination, but of generosity. And what is that term? Okay, that's generosity, caring for others, okay? Let America be perceived as a society that really cares about other people, and that will provide us with the security that all the wars and all the armies in the world will never give us. So, how do you make that real? Well, we developed the Global Marshall Plan. And the Global Marshall Plan was just reintroduced. He did it last session, and he's reintroduced it late last week by Congressman Keith Ellison of Minneapolis. He reintroduced the bill. It's now HRES, believe it or not, 157. So we've got 156, the ESRA, and 157, the Global Marshall Plan. Okay? And these two are, for those who want something concrete and specific, we've got it. Okay? We have some specific programs that we need your help taking to local city councils to endorse, state legislators to endorse, your local congresspeople and your senators to endorse, but also to bring them to your unions, to bring them to your professional organizations, to bring them to your universities, to bring them to your churches and synagogues and mosques and wherever else, whatever civic organizations you're part of, and to get them to endorse it. Why? Because we think that the ESRA or the GMP are going to pass in the next 2 years with this Congress? Of course not. But because we understand that the task is to develop a new discourse in the society, a new set of ideas. And that new set of ideas, unfortunately, is not coming out of the liberal and progressive world at this moment. It needs to be, and we have been fortunate enough to be able to articulate a vision of what those new ideas could be, and to then provide you with concrete things that people could say, well, where do those ideas would actually lead? And they would lead to the ESRA, the Environmental and Social Responsibility Amendment, and to the Global Marshall Plan. You see, so you've got the specifics, and then you've got the worldview. But we need it to not be that people come and say, I really like what Rabbi Lerner said. No, we can't rely on Rabbi Lerner. It has to be you. It really has to be you. It has to be you who can say to other people, I really believe in a world based on love, kindness, and generosity. And when they say to you, oh, come on, you're so unrealistic. Okay, you're so unrealistic. We have to say back to them this, that, 40 years ago, when the second wave of the women's movement came forward and said, we want to overcome patriarchy and we want to overcome sexism in the society, most of the people, including most of the women, responded to those early women in the second wave by saying, you're so unrealistic. And thank God that those women refused to be realistic. And because they refuse to be realistic, incredible transformations way beyond even their biggest fantasies have happened in the world today. Not that we've won the battle totally against patriarchy or sexism, but huge advances have been made. And similarly, the same thing with the civil rights movement, when so many people started, including black pastors, telling Martin Luther King, hey, hush up, don't stir up trouble. You're going no place. And similarly, the incredible advances made by the LGBTQ movements, and so that nobody would have dreamt 30 years ago that the issue of gay marriage would actually be a viable political issue in the society. So, and similarly, 7 weeks ago, if I had said to you, there's going to be we should be supporting democratic transformation in the Middle East, you would have said, hey, you're really off your rocker. That's so unrealistic. Okay, we want to say that to believe in God in the way that we do is, what it means is to believe that there is a force in the universe that makes possible the transformation from that which is to that which ought to be. And if you believe that, if you believe that, then whatever that force is, that's what people mean by God. And if we're not talking about the big man in heaven view, okay? We're talking about a force in the universe, some characteristic of reality that makes that possible, okay? Whereas to be an idolater is to be a realist. Idolatry is realism. What does that mean? Realism is taking that which is as your criterion and framework for what can be. Okay, and as a result, you stay within the context of what is, which is shaped by the strongest powers of the time. So when people put you down for being utopian or a dreamer, say, yeah, of course I am. I don't want to be a realist. I want to transform reality. And so screw reality. We want to change it. Okay? We want to transform it. So don't be realistic. Don't be realistic. Okay, my sister was singing to me just before a song that my mother had taken from some other song context, and it was, they called me a dreamer and laughed at my dreams, but it happened exactly that way. Okay, so the transformation is really possible, and our goal is to be testifiers to the possibility of transformation, testifying to that possibility. My friends, we can do this. We can do this. It can't be me. It can't be Peter. It can't be Amma. It can't be Nan. It's got to be us together. And if we can stay together and support each other to reject the contours of the reality today, which are both the contours of the capitalist society as it's structured, but also the contours of a left that doesn't talk to the heart, that doesn't recognize the need for a spiritual dimension to reality, that doesn't speak about love and caring and generosity and put that in the forefront of our discourse. That can only be replaced if you are willing to speak up in the public arena. Sometimes we don't say enough I remember, I'll just tell you this little story that my father told me, and maybe some of you have heard it before, about this guy who's before the Second World War, when there weren't phone lines to Europe, and he was his mother's 80th birthday was happening. And he wanted to get her a very special gift, so he went into looking at all these stores in the world and in Europe, and finally he found a store that said the most special gifts in the world. And he came in there and he saw a parrot that was on sale for $1,600. $1,600 in the 1930s was a lot of money. So he said, well, what's so special about this parrot? And the guy said, this parrot speaks 39 different languages. 39 different languages. Okay, make a story short, he bargained them down to $1,200, sent the parrot back to his mother for her 80th birthday, and when he got back to the States, he called her up and said, Mom, did you get the birthday gift I sent you? And she said, yeah, thank you so much, it was delicious. He said, Mom, you didn't eat that parrot. She said, yeah, thank you. It was really a great birthday gift, and it was really tasty. He said, Mom, I paid $1,200 for that parrot. She said, what did you pay $1,200 for a parrot? So he said, Mom, that parrot spoke 39 different languages. So the mother takes a deep breath and says, 39 different languages? So why didn't he say something? Okay, we know in our hearts that the world is aching for a different kind of discourse. It is yearning for a world based on love and kindness and generosity. This is not just a fantasy, but in each of us, both voices are there. The voice that says it's impossible and the voice that says, yes, I really want it. Our task is to strengthen the voice that says, yes, I really want it, to help people go for it. But in order to do that, you need to be able to say it, that I myself am there, and I don't care whether you tell me it's realistic. This is what I want to fight for. This is what I want to live for. I'm imploring you. We need to implore each other and our friends. Don't spend the rest of your time on this planet fighting for something that you don't really believe in because somebody's told you that's the only realistic thing you can get. Go for your highest vision of the good. Go for your highest vision of the good. And we can do that. We can do that together. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.